Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio no pictures live stream. In this essay, there we go. Must be too early in the morning. I'm losing my spot here. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car or your truck or on public transport. In this essay, this presentation, I'd like to talk about the strange issue where in white majority countries, the globalist controlled media are absolutely maniacal about not showing too many white images in the media, images of white people or white situations and white groups. And so this is in the negative. They're quite happy to call an all-white group Nazis, but that's the only time they'll show you an all-white group these days. And in contrast this with say places like China or Nigeria or Pakistan and so on, where you'll be lucky to see any images of white people at all, unless maybe as a visiting politician from the prime minister of I don't know, France or Germany or something's coming along, and then they'll show that. But other than that, it's only brown or black people. If that's the indigenous race of that country, that's all you see. You don't see or hardly see any white people at all. Now, because white people are so prominent in business and technology, you would expect to see some, but in fact, it's rare in those places. Whenever I go to those places on business and in the hotel room, channel surfing, that sort of stuff, all you see are the local people. That includes places, advanced economies as well, like Japan or South Korea. In Japan, there was, unless it was a Western movie, I remember watching one of the Sylvester Stallone movies, and it was dubbed in Japanese, and it's really funny to sort of see that Sylvester Stallone comes on when he opens his mouth. You don't, outside of Western movies or something, you don't see any non-Japanese people at all. There was some show about Western rock music where they had a Japanese girl and a red-headed, freckled Western guy, because red hair and freckles is the Japanese are sort of, or Asians generally, but the Japanese are consumed by just the sheer difference and the exoticness of the difference. So they had this red-headed, freckled dude who was like a co-anchor or co-host on this music show, which did include a lot of Western music and Western artists. So he would add things like translations to some of the words, that sort of thing. So, but that aside, you just don't see it yet. Just looking at, there was a show that was going through all the headline, all the major newspapers around the Western world, and the headlines, or the front page rather, of all these Western newspapers, and not one of them had white people or only white people on the front page. Can you believe that? So this is white all in white majority countries, yet not one front page had an all-white people depicted on it. There was one that had one of the rock, like Taylor Swift, or one of the leftist rock stars, and she was on her own in the focus, but in the background there was the black people. So there was not a single one that had all white people. This is in white majority countries. Something else has struck me. I was looking at the Olympic Games page, and this is like their promo or PR page, and there was not one photo that I saw, at least I didn't go through every single one of them. I scrolled through a few pages of these photos. Not one of them had all white people in the photo. Now, the white people, all white people won all first, second, and third. And if they did have a photo of the three white people winning, then it was a black person who was putting the medals around their neck. So there was not a single photo, not one, that had all white people in it. I mean, it's incredible. There were photos with all black people or all brown people. They were permitted, but there was no photo of all white people. Now, this can't be an accident. I mean, it just can't be. So this has got to be, there's a central propaganda secretariat where they sit down. So they sit down and go, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, rule number one, no photo with all white people in it can be allowed. Rule number two, photos with black and brown people, or black and brown, they can be allowed. Rule number three, and so it has to be that planned. It just can't be accidental. And the same goes with the front page in the newspapers. It's impossible that all these front pages show no only white people. I mean, it just can't be so. Again, unless it was, in the recent protests in Britain where it was all white people, that they wanted to depict white people as far right Nazi Hitlers and everything like that. Those were the only photos I've seen recently of all white people. But let's go to, and you can do this online, you don't have to travel there. Let's have a look at the headline newspapers in Nigeria, or Beijing, or Pakistan, or Bangladesh, or India, or let's just go around the world to brown and black countries. And the front pages, again, unless it's a visiting politician or something from a white country, but the front pages don't show any white people. They only show the local people. And what's wrong with that? And again, if you look at the TV shows, you look at the news anchors. If I look at the news anchors in any of these countries, all the news anchors in the places are local black people, or local brown people, or of the local religion. If you go to Saudi Arabia, they're not white people doing the news on news anchors. And yet, if I look at the national broadcaster in Australia, they've got a commitment to, the National Broadcasting Group. There's two news outlets in there. They've got a commitment to having majority non-white broadcasters in what was a white majority country. So we can see an absolutely huge difference here in depictions and attitudes and in propaganda. Now, the same thing can be for, say, looking at what would you call soap opera type cheap dramas, soap opera type things. If you look at them in, say, in again, in the Arabic, Middle Eastern Arabic countries, or Islamic Pakistan, Bangladesh, they still have these, these soap opera type shows where petty family bickering going on, things like that, and yet they're all local people. They might have a visitor from the neighbouring Muslim country. That might happen. They're in. I don't know, they're in Syria, but somebody, the third cousin from Jordan, comes to visit. That might go on, but they don't have white people. There's no other races. There's no black people in there or white people, and the same goes in Africa, Nigeria, and places like that. They're all black people who are depicted in their soap operas and again in the news anchors. So it's only white countries that are under assault, that are being forced and aggressively forced by the globalists to become multiracial and multicultural without anybody's consent or agreement. No one's voted for it, no one's asked for it, no one's agreed to it, nobody wants it. But still, it's being forced and very, very heavy-handed. In other areas too, we all see this in advertising. You'd be forgiven for thinking that pretty much every relationship in Australia or the West generally, is mixed race. You'd be forgiven for thinking that. You'd be forgiven for thinking that for every white person out there, their very bestest buddy is a black person. All again, the mixed race relationship thing. Now, if I go to probably one of the most ethnically diverse areas of Sydney, and that have been ethnically diverse for 20 years plus. So a lot of locally born people, where you would suspect the locally born people be far more prone to mixed race relationships than, say, people who've come from another country. But as in, you've all been through the same school system and so on, and lived in the same place. So the likelihood of mixed race occurring in that sort of situation, much higher than it would be otherwise. But you're lucky to see 1 or 2% mixed race relationships. And again, those are in the most ethnically diverse areas. So this depiction, this determination to not show white people and to depict white societies as being all multicultural, mixed race, and so on, is an outrageous and grotesque misrepresentation of the reality. It's some imagined situation that just doesn't exist, and as far as I can tell, will never exist. And again, a point I come to many times is Indians, 5 and 6 generations Western born, still send back to the village of their ancestors for husbands and brides. Even Arabic peoples from who've been in Australia, say, for 3 generations now, they still send back to the village of their ancestors for husbands and brides. So the integration rate among Islamic people and Hindus is about 0. You get quite a high integration rate between white Christians. That works out. But even there, the first generation, often, not always, but if they've come from sort of rural areas of non-English speaking countries, then even they tend to stay within their racial diaspora. So it's typically the 2nd or the 3rd generation. Even there, Greeks, rural peasant farming Greeks who come from the outer rural areas of those places where their families lived there for 1,000 years, and they emigrate, then they tend also to be rather slow in integrating. So really, this interracial depiction in the media and in the soap opera type dramas and so on is just an insane drug-induced fantasy of a world that they imagine exists, or they hope one day may exist, but it's so far from existing in reality that you might as well forget about it altogether. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.